The day I caught my wife cheating was the day my life ended, or so I thought. What I didn't know was that heartbreak would lead me straight to the family I never saw coming. It was 2 years ago when my whole world shifted. I found out that my wife Linda had been having an affair. What followed was a brutal argument, one that ended with me grabbing what little I could and walking out. But let me be clear, it wasn't the argument that drove me away. No, I left because I refused to share a home with someone who'd betrayed me like that. The moment she gave herself to someone else, our marriage ended in my heart. I checked into a cheap motel not far from where I worked. It wasn't much, worn carpet, flickering lamp in the corner, but for now it was enough. I set down the 2 suitcases I'd managed to throw together in the whirlwind of it all, and then, needing to numb the storm in my chest, I headed to a small neighborhood bar within walking distance. Driving wasn't an option. I wasn't about to add a DWI to my list of regrets. The place was practically deserted, probably because it was a slow midweek night. Just a couple of older folks sitting quietly at the bar, 2 pairs of people at tables, and me. I slipped into a booth against the far wall, wanting to be as far from conversation as possible. A tired-looking waitress wandered over. I ordered a shot of Jack and a cold beer, just looking to lose myself in the haze for a while. By the time I was halfway through my second round, something clicked. I sat there, staring into my drink, realizing I had a choice. I could wallow in the wreckage or face this head-on like I always had. I wasn't new to pressure. I built luxury homes for a living, usually juggling 2 or 3 builds at once. In that world, hesitation cost money. I learned early on that if something went wrong, the best thing to do was handle it fast. That night, I crawled into bed at the motel and tried to sleep, but my thoughts wouldn't let me rest. Still, I woke up with a plan. First stop that morning was the bank. I transferred every dollar from our joint accounts into a new one with only my name on it. I wasn't about to let her run wild with our money. Then I went through our credit cards, canceling every shared one and keeping only the ones registered under my name, plus the ones tied to my construction business. Finally, I drove over to see my lawyer. Keith's more than just legal counsel, he's an old friend. He typically handles real estate cases, but his wife, Maria, also a partner in the firm, specializes in family law. Between the 2 of them, I knew I'd be covered. We got the ball rolling on divorce papers that afternoon. Later that day, I swung by the house, what used to be our home. My daughter Emma was there, heartbroken and confused. I did my best to comfort her, holding it together for her sake. She was hungry, so I headed into the kitchen to whip something up. That's when I saw it. Tucked under a magnet on the fridge was an envelope with my name on it, scrawled in Linda's handwriting. I picked it up, turned it over a few times in my hand, and then set it aside on the counter. Whatever it was could wait. Right now, my little girl needed dinner. After we ate and watched a little TV, I tucked Emma into bed. Only then did I go back to the kitchen, back to that envelope. I stared at it, heart heavy, already knowing that no matter what words were written inside, they wouldn't change what had been done. I had known for a while that Linda and I were drifting. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have imagined, was how far gone she really was. I hadn't been back home for the last 2 nights. I figured the best thing I could do for both of us was to tell the truth. So, I sat down with my daughter Lily and told her straight. Her mother had left a note saying she was gone. That was it. I didn't sugarcoat it, and I didn't try to pretend I had all the answers because I didn't. She asked me when her mom would be coming back, and all I could do was admit that I didn't know. We got through the weekend somehow. I tried to keep things as normal as I could for Lily's sake. On Monday morning, I got her up, fed her breakfast, and dropped her off at school like it was any other day. But it wasn't. Afterward, I drove out to Linda's old job, hoping to track her down or at least find someone who might know where she'd gone. I ended up meeting with one of the officers handling missing persons reports. I didn't beat around the bush, I told him everything. I explained that I wasn't trying to chase her down out of spite. I just needed to serve her with divorce papers and move forward with my life. I showed him the note she had left behind and shared what little I'd uncovered, that she and the guy she ran off with had both quit their jobs around the same time. Naturally, the officer asked where I was on the Friday Linda supposedly disappeared. I told him I'd spent the entire day at one of my job sites, working on a new build with a full crew of contractors who could vouch for me. He seemed satisfied with that. Eventually, he told me that unless foul play was suspected, it probably wouldn't go anywhere from a legal standpoint. Honestly, that was fine with me. As long as I didn't have to deal with her anymore, I was okay with it. Later that day, I stopped by my attorney's office. Keith and his wife, Maria, were both there, and they were more than just legal help, they were friends. Maria looked at me with such kindness in her eyes. When I told her I wasn't planning on getting married again, not after this mess, she reached across the table and gently patted my hand. "Mike," she said, "I know how hard this has been for you. I know it's raw right now. But please, don't shut yourself off from the world. You're still here. Life's still out there waiting." I gave her a small nod, but I meant what I said. Right now, my world was Lily. Everything else could wait. She was hurting even more than I was, and I had to stay strong for her. Keith and Maria understood. They both gave me that look, the one that says they're worried but not pushing. They knew I wasn't going to walk away from my daughter, no matter how broken I felt inside. Still, Lily was struggling. She started having these awful nightmares. I'd hear her crying out in the middle of the night, and I'd rush into her room to find her tangled in her sheets, sobbing. I'd sit on the edge of her bed and gently wake her up. The second her eyes opened, she'd throw her little arms around me like she was clinging to the last solid thing in the world. When I asked what the dreams were about, she'd whisper that she was lost and couldn't find me or her mom. That kind of thing, it hits different when it comes from your child. It tore me up inside. The one bit of light during all of this came from Renee, my office manager. I'd brought her on to help with all the behind-the-scenes work, filing, organizing permits, keeping the books straight. She was a pro at keeping things running so I could stay focused on the job sites. Renee was something else. She wasn't tall, maybe 5'4" on a good day, but she had these big warm brown eyes that always seemed to see right through the chaos, and the sweetest button nose that crinkled when she smiled. She had a calmness about her, this steady presence I didn't realize I needed until I found myself leaning on it more and more. I figured she was probably in her early 30s, give or take a year. From what I could see, she clearly took care of herself. She came in wearing a sharp blue business suit, nothing flashy or revealing, but it hugged her just enough to show she kept in shape. Professional, poised, and confident. That first impression stuck with me. The interview itself went smoothly. She was sharp. I was genuinely impressed by her qualifications. Her name was Rachel. She'd spent several years working for her father, who ran a construction company, and she knew her way around the business. Project timelines, budgeting, contractor management, the whole deal. When I asked her why she left, she gave an honest answer. After her dad passed away, the company was sold and she hadn't really found a job that clicked since. I respected her straightforwardness. But what really stood out to me that day wasn't just her resume, it was how naturally she interacted with Lily. My daughter had always been shy around men, especially ones she didn't know. But when Rachel walked in, something shifted. She had this warm energy that immediately put Lily at ease. That alone told me a lot. I also took the time to meet with Dr. Walters, the child psychologist I'd been referred to. I explained everything, Linda's sudden disappearance, the emotional fallout, and why I felt it was so important that Lily have someone to talk to who could help her navigate all this. Dr. Walters agreed and set up a schedule for sessions twice a week. Some of them would be just Lily, but she wanted me involved too, at least occasionally, to help create a fuller picture and make sure Lily felt supported. Around the same time, something else happened that I didn't quite expect. The day after I filed the missing persons report on Linda, I noticed Lily had started to loosen her grip on me, literally and figuratively. Up until then, she wouldn't let me out of her sight when we were together, but now she started giving me a little space again. It was like she was finally beginning to feel safe. Rachel and her husband, Matt, started inviting us over now and then, for cookouts, little family gatherings, nothing fancy. At first, I wasn't sure about it. I mean, I appreciated the gesture, but I wasn't sure how appropriate it was. Me, a single dad, showing up to a family barbecue at my employee's house. But Rachel insisted. Said it would be good for Lily to play with their daughter, Chloe. Just normal, everyday stuff that didn't involve grief or questions. I already knew Matt from a few run-ins over the years, mostly through business stuff, and I wondered how he'd feel about his wife bringing her boss into their home. Turned out I had nothing to worry about. He was welcoming, kind, and didn't seem the least bit fazed. Actually, he seemed glad Lily and I were there. That kind of hospitality, it meant a lot during that time. But just when I thought life might be settling into something close to stable, something happened that rattled me to my core. One evening, I was cleaning out an old box Linda had left behind, one of the few she didn't take when she left. I had meant to throw it out weeks ago but couldn't bring myself to. I opened it absent-mindedly and found a small vial inside. Curious and maybe a little reckless, I twisted it open and took a sniff. It hit me immediately. Cocaine. My stomach turned. There was also a CD tucked into the corner of the box. I slid it into my computer, not really expecting anything. But it loaded quickly and what came up stopped me cold. It was a video. A home movie, but not the family kind. It had clearly been filmed in the basement of one of the homes I had built myself. The scene playing out in front of me didn't just shock me, it sickened me. I barely made it to the bathroom before I threw up, but the first wave splattered across the floor. I finished in the toilet, retching until my stomach was empty. Then I just sat there on the cold tile, my back against the wall, staring at nothing, lost in the silence and the ache of disbelief. After sitting on the bathroom floor for what felt like an eternity, I finally pulled myself together. I got up, grabbed a mop and cleaned up the mess I'd left behind. On my way out, I noticed the video was still playing on my computer screen. I didn't even let myself glance at it again. I just walked over, closed the player and shut the whole thing down without a second look. Once everything was cleaned up and I could breathe again, I picked up my phone and called Maria. "Hey Maria, it's Mike. You got a minute?" Her voice came through warm, steady, just what I needed. "Mike, Keith and I always have time for you. What's going on?" I paused. I didn't even know where to start. Later that week, during a quiet moment at Rachel and Matt's house, our fourth time visiting, I was outside on the patio with Matt while the girls were inside making lunch. Lily and Chloe were off playing just out of earshot. That's when Matt turned to me, his voice low and concerned. "So how are things, really?" I looked at him for a second before answering. "As good as they can be when you find out your wife was into drugs, and worse." "Group stuff, Matt. Stuff I never would have imagined in a million years." His eyes widened. "You're kidding." I shook my head. "I found a CD. A recording. It was filmed in a house I built. My house. And some coke too, just sitting there in a box she left behind. The woman I thought I married, she would have never done any of this. Or maybe she always would have and I just didn't want to see it." There was a long silence between us before he finally said, "If a woman's willing to cheat with you, there's no guarantee she won't cheat on you. I've always believed that." "Yeah," I said quietly. "I believe it now too." That CD changed more than just my understanding of the past. At our next session with Dr. Walters, she could tell right away something heavy had landed. She didn't press, not then. But before I left, she asked if I could come in again the next day, just me without Lily. I nodded. I knew she could sense the shift. Then everything else came crashing down. A few days later we were at work. Nothing out of the ordinary. I was in my office going over blueprints for a new build, and Renee was out front managing some calls and paperwork. I remember hearing the phone ring, then her voice, shaky, panicked. I jumped from my chair and rushed out to find her standing frozen, the receiver clutched in her hand and tears welling in her eyes. "It's Matt," she choked out. He'd been in a car accident. It didn't seem too serious at first, just a bad bruise on his leg from the crash. But what no one realized at the time was that the impact had caused a blood clot to form. That clot broke loose and traveled to his brain. It triggered a massive stroke. By the time we got to the hospital, things were already in motion. It felt like we were walking through a dream. I stayed by Renee's side, helpless as the doctors rushed to stabilize him. After a while, I realized it was almost time to pick up the girls from school. Renee didn't want me to leave and I didn't want her to be alone. So I called Maria and gave her a quick rundown of what had happened. Without hesitation, Maria said she'd go pick up Lily and Chloe and bring them to the hospital. I also called the school to let them know what was going on, just so the girls would be ready when Maria arrived. Not long after, Maria called to say they had pulled into the parking lot. I walked outside to meet them. Lily ran up to me and I held her close. Chloe, G, as everyone called her, stood next to Maria looking confused and scared. Eventually, a nurse came out and told us Renee could see Matt. G started to follow, but Renee gently shook her head. "Steve," she said softly, "would you mind looking after G for me? I need to stay here tonight." G looked like she was about to protest, but I knelt down in front of her and took her hands. "Sweetheart, your mom needs you to be strong right now. Come home with Lily and me tonight, and I promise I'll bring you back first thing in the morning. If anything changes, your mom will call us right away, okay?" Tears welled up in her big brown eyes, but after a pause, she nodded. She hugged her mother tightly, then turned and reached for Lily's hand. Together they walked out with me, two little girls leaning on each other without fully understanding the weight of the world shifting around them. Back inside, I sat down in the chair beside Matt's hospital bed, watching the stillness that had settled over a man who'd welcomed me into his home like family. I didn't have the words. I just sat there quietly keeping watch. I set down the overnight bag in the corner of the hospital room and quietly slipped back out with G so her mother could try and get some rest. We returned to the waiting area and sat in silence, each of us trying to make sense of everything that had happened. It was almost another hour and a half before Renee finally came looking for us. She looked utterly drained, eyes red, her shoulders heavy with grief. G stood up first and threw her arms around her mom and I followed, hugging them both. I suggested we grab a bite to eat, so I gently guided Renee toward the cafeteria. We found a quiet table and I bought her a small breakfast. It took a little coaxing to get her to eat, but I didn't blame her. Her appetite was gone and it wasn't coming back anytime soon. Still, she picked at the food until it was gone and I could tell it helped, even if just a little. Afterward, I walked up to the nurse's desk on the floor to ask if there was a quiet place Renee could lie down for a bit. The nurse nodded and asked us to follow her down the hall. Later that morning, I had to break the news to Lily. She and G had grown close over the last few weeks, and I knew this would hit her hard. When I sat down beside her, I tried to keep it gentle. "Sweetheart, something happened. G's dad passed away." Her eyes instantly welled up with tears. I pulled her into a hug, holding her as she began to cry into my shirt. "She's going to need you now, Lily. More than ever," I whispered. "So I need you to be strong, all right? Get dressed, and when you're ready, she'll probably need help getting herself together too. We've got to head to the hospital." She pulled back, wiping her face with the sleeve of her hoodie. "Okay, Dad. I'll help her." In that moment, she looked older than her 14 years. There was a calm maturity in her eyes that hadn't been there before, and I felt a quiet swell of pride in my chest. Back at the hospital, I made some calls. James and Renee had used Maria, our shared family lawyer, for their estate planning, so I got in touch with her and Keith. They dropped everything and came straight over. Maria stayed close by Renee's side, giving her some much-needed comfort, while I handled the practical stuff, making arrangements with the funeral home to take care of James's remains. Eventually, the weight of it all caught up with Renee. She was completely worn down. Grief, shock, and sleep deprivation had taken their toll. With Maria's help, we got her into bed and gave her space to rest. Later that afternoon, Maria and I had a quiet moment in the kitchen. She let me know she would handle the estate matters for Renee pro bono. She already had a copy of James's will, and her voice softened when she said, "We'll make sure everything is taken care of." Before I left her room, I sat beside Renee. "I don't want to say this like it's just a backup plan," I said carefully, "but I'm here for you. For whatever you need." She looked at me and nodded. She knew what I meant, even if I couldn't bring myself to say it outright. I filled her in on the funeral arrangements and told her I'd be picking up her parents from the airport later that day. They were flying in from out of state. She thanked me softly, her words thin but sincere. When Lily and G finally came downstairs, I told Renee to stay seated and rest. I got breakfast started for everyone. It was simple: eggs, toast, and fruit, but it was something we could all gather around even if no one had much of an appetite. Once I had the dishes washed and the kitchen back in order, I checked the time. It was getting close to the hour. I grabbed my keys. Time to head to the airport. I got to the airport early enough to be standing right there at the arrivals gate when Renee's parents walked through. You could see the weight of the week all over them, travel-weary, grief-heavy but steady. I greeted them with a quiet hug and a promise that I'd get them wherever they needed to go. The funeral brought out more people than I expected. A lot of the subcontractors I'd worked with over the years came. These were folks who didn't just know James, they knew Renee too. She'd earned their respect and their presence spoke volumes. Her parents stayed in town for a couple more days, and on Sunday they invited Lily and me over for lunch. It was a quiet afternoon. Comfort food, soft conversation. After we finished eating, the grown-ups made our way into the living room, and Lily wandered off with G to her room. We chatted for a while about regular life stuff. Nothing too deep, just the kind of conversation you cling to after everything's been upside down. And then, out of nowhere, Renee's mom, Victoria, turned to her daughter and said, "Sweetheart, have you thought about what your next steps might be?" She spoke gently, but with the kind of concern only a mother has. "You know your father and I would love for you and G to come back home. You'd have a place, stability." Renee smiled, tired but grateful. "I don't know, Mom. I don't know what's next yet. I just know I wouldn't have made it this far without Mike." That was the first time she'd said something like that in front of anyone, and hearing it out loud hit me in a place I didn't expect. After we wrapped up, I walked Lily out to the car. Once she was buckled in, Renee's dad, Dan, came outside with us. He stuck out his hand and gave me a firm shake. "Mike," he said, "Renee's told me what you've done, what you've been for her and for G. I want you to know Victoria and I are truly grateful. I don't even want to think about how much harder this could have been without you there." I looked him in the eye and replied honestly, "Dan, it's the least I could do. James and G, they were there for Lily and me when my life fell apart. This is me showing up the way they did." Back at work, life started slowly finding rhythm again. One morning, I walked into the office and found Rachel waiting for me with a sly smile. "Your books are a mess," she said, waving a few files at me. "You go deal with the crews and I'll handle this." I laughed. You're really good at this whole boss wrangling thing. She grinned. Well, you're easy to wrangle when I've got coffee and paperwork. I spent the rest of that day floating, smiling like a fool without even realizing it. Funny how the little things can hold you together when the big things are still healing. Over the next year, it seemed like we ended up spending nearly every weekend together, Renee, G, Lily, and me. Cookouts, pool days, movie nights, or just sitting around the table playing cards. What started as support turned into friendship, and that slowly started to feel like family. One Saturday, I'd had to swing by a site to deal with a minor headache. Nothing serious, just one of those little fires that needed putting out. By the time I got back home, Renee's car was already in the driveway. We'd planned a lazy afternoon by the pool and some grilled chicken for dinner. As I stepped inside, I could hear the girls laughing out back. Real laughter, the kind that only comes when kids feel safe. I smiled, dropped my keys on the counter, and grabbed my swim trunks from the laundry room where I'd left them to dry. Normally, I'd head upstairs to change, but I figured I'd just use the downstairs bathroom this time. I pushed the door open without thinking, and there she was. Renee. She was in the middle of changing into her swimsuit, and I caught just a glimpse before I immediately backed out and shut the door behind me, face burning. Sorry? I didn't know, I thought. I stammered, heart pounding. The door opened a crack and her voice followed, soft and steady. It's okay, Mike. I turned, still wide-eyed. She stepped out a second later, wrapped in a towel, and lightly brushed my cheek with her hand. I know you'd never do that on purpose, she said. Don't worry. Really. Now go change and get the grill going, I'm starving. Then she smiled and walked off toward the backyard. I stood there like a statue, my mouth half open, stunned. And then, finally, I exhaled. I hadn't even realized I'd been holding my breath. Of course she wasn't mad. And maybe, just maybe, that meant something more. I hurried to get changed just like she asked, tossing on my swim trunks and heading out to the backyard. Renee was already out there, lounging with a glass of wine in hand while Lily and G splashed around in the pool, laughter echoing through the yard. I fired up the grill, keeping my focus on the chicken, but truth be told, it was hard not to glance her way. There was something so peaceful about that moment. Her smile, the sunlight catching in her hair, the way the girls' laughter danced on the breeze. And for the first time in a long while, I felt something stirring in me that wasn't just grief or duty. It was something warmer. Something I hadn't felt since before everything fell apart. To be honest, I'd always had a pretty strong sex drive. More than most, probably. It used to make me wonder if something was wrong with me. Back in my marriage, I often tried to close the distance between us with physical closeness. But after everything with Linda, all of that had faded into the background. Desire took a back seat to survival. Until now. The next day, I went to pick up Lily from Renee's place. I felt uneasy as I walked up to the door, still thinking about the night before, worried maybe I'd let my thoughts drift too far. When she opened the door, I wondered if she could read it in my eyes. But she just smiled, and any fears I had faded. If she sensed anything, she didn't show it. I dropped Lily off at home, told her I'd be back at 6, and went back to my place to keep myself busy. I spent the day in the garden, turning soil, trimming hedges, anything to keep my thoughts from wandering. At exactly 6 o'clock, I knocked on Renee's door. When she opened it, I nearly lost my breath. She stood there in a little black dress, elegant, simple, but with just enough to make my heart skip. She wore a strand of pearls around her neck, black heels, and stockings that made her look like she had just walked out of a dream. God, you look absolutely stunning, I managed to say. She gave me that same smile, the one that always hit me like sunlight after rain. Why, thank you, kind sir. That evening we attended a formal industry event. It was an awards banquet for local builders and contractors, and by the time the speeches wrapped up, I'd been handed a recognition plaque for the year's most consistent quality in custom builds. Colleagues came over to shake my hand, and through it all, Renee stood beside me, her hand occasionally brushing mine. When the dance floor opened, I turned to her. Would you like to dance? I'd love to, she said, and we stepped out into the crowd. The first song was upbeat. I'm no dancer, never have been, but she was graceful, like she belonged out there. I couldn't take my eyes off her. She moved with confidence and ease, and I just tried to keep up, laughing as we spun in circles and bumped into a few people along the way. When the tempo slowed for the next song, she stepped in closer. I wrapped my arm gently around her waist, and she rested a hand on my shoulder. Our eyes met, and for a moment, everything else faded. No grief, no past, no worries about what tomorrow might bring. Just the warmth of that closeness. Later that week, we decided to unwind with an evening swim. I had just finished setting up the hot tub from my phone, one of the perks of having smart tech in the house. By the time we got there, it was perfectly heated. Since Renee and G had practically moved in during summer weekends, they'd started leaving their swimsuits here, so everything was ready to go. I grabbed a bottle of wine and 2 glasses and headed outside while she changed. I slipped into my trunks in the laundry room and made my way out to the hot tub under the stars. It was quiet, peaceful. I took a deep breath and waited. When she joined me, there was this calm between us, the kind that settles in when people understand each other without needing to say much. The water bubbled around us, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was holding my breath anymore. We talked, we laughed, and we let the silence speak where words weren't needed. There was a closeness growing between us, real, unexpected, and honest. I didn't know where it was headed, but I knew that whatever came next, it wasn't just about healing anymore. It was about living again. I never thought I'd feel this way about someone again. After everything that had happened, after what I went through with Linda, I didn't think it was even possible. But there I was, lying beside Renee, her head on my chest, our breathing slow and steady in the quiet of early morning. When James was alive, she once told me they'd talked about what would happen if one of them passed first. She said they both agreed they wanted the other to keep living, to find love again if they could. As we lay there, I wrapped my arms around her. She let out a soft hum of contentment while I gently ran my hand along her back. After a while, she whispered that she was hungry, so we got up, took a quick shower, and headed to the kitchen. I made us a couple of Denver omelets, and I couldn't help but smile to myself as I watched her, hair still damp, sitting at the counter in one of my old shirts, barefoot and peaceful. It felt normal. And good. Really good. After breakfast, we cleaned up the kitchen, poured ourselves some coffee, and stepped out onto the back deck. The morning sun was warm, and we sat together in silence, just taking it all in. Birds chirped in the distance, the breeze moved through the trees, and for a while, the world felt still. Then, out of nowhere, Renee turned to me. "Did you mean it, Mike? What you said last night?" I looked at her and nodded. "Every word. I'm yours completely." She didn't say anything right away, just leaned over and rested her head against my shoulder. We stayed like that, lost in the kind of quiet that only comes when you don't need words to feel understood. That Sunday passed like a dream. We were wrapped up in each other, connected in every way a couple could be. And it wasn't about lust or distraction. It was about comfort, closeness, the kind of intimacy that feels safe and real. When Monday morning rolled around, we woke up in each other's arms, got ready together, and swung by her place so she could grab a fresh change of clothes. While she brewed coffee at the office, I sat down with the day's paperwork and got myself back into work mode. Before heading out to check on the 3 houses we had under construction, I leaned over, kissed her softly, and smiled. It felt like the most natural thing in the world. Around lunchtime, I picked up Chinese takeout and brought it back to the office so we could eat together. Lily had adjusted better than I could have hoped. She and G were already like sisters, and Renee had become a second mother to her in everything but name. My only real concern was how G would feel about it. I didn't want her to think we were trying to replace James, or that we were rushing into anything that would overshadow his memory. Renee and I had made a promise. If either of the girls had an issue with us moving in together, we'd wait. We wouldn't force it. We'd stay committed, of course, but we'd hold off on combining our homes unless and until they were both truly okay with it, or until they'd graduated and could understand the whole picture. One afternoon, Lily caught me off guard. "Dad," she said, "I'd really like it if Renee and G moved in with us." Her words made my heart swell, but I kept my response measured. "That means a lot to me, sweetie. But let's hold on a second, all right? Renee still needs to talk to G about it. She might not feel the same way, and that's okay too." Lily gave me this knowing look, like she was already ahead of me. Then she just shrugged and smiled. "Okay, Daddy." Sometimes I forget how much wisdom a child can carry in such a small frame. I told Lily I'd wait, and I meant it. Thankfully, the wait wasn't long. Less than 20 minutes later, the house phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID and saw it was Renee. I picked it up right away. "Hey," I said. Her voice came through warm and steady. "I talked to G." I held my breath. "She's actually really happy about it," Renee continued. "It went about as well as we could have hoped for." I let out a deep sigh, the kind you don't even know you're holding until it's gone. "And get this," she added with a laugh, "apparently the girls had already talked about this. They were just waiting on us to catch up." That made me laugh too. Of course they had. Kids always see things more clearly than we give them credit for. That night, we went out to dinner, just the 4 of us, to celebrate becoming a family in the truest sense. There wasn't a big announcement or some formal speech. Just smiles, warm hugs, and an unspoken sense of rightness. We spent all day Sunday making runs back and forth between Renee's old place and our house, bringing the last of their things home. We packed, loaded, unpacked, and laughed through most of it. It felt like we were closing one door and opening another, together. Later that evening, Renee and I sat down and talked about what to do with her house. It was a good place, full of memories, but it didn't make sense to keep it. We decided to sell it, and she put it on the market the following week. Business had picked up again. Life, it seemed, wasn't slowing down to let us settle in. Renee offered to start doing more field work to keep things moving smoothly. She was a natural at it, and we both knew it. Since she was stepping out of the office more, we needed to hire someone to take on some of her administrative duties. I left the hiring up to her. After all, she knew that side of the job better than anyone. The following spring we got married. We kept the ceremony small, just a tight circle of friends and family. Maria stood by Renee's side as her bridesmaid, and Keith was right there beside me as my best man. It was simple, honest, and perfect. No fanfare, no pressure, just a celebration of a bond that had grown quietly and deeply between two people who had both lost something, and found something even more beautiful in the aftermath. For our honeymoon, I surprised Renee with a trip to Fiji. A week of quiet beaches, ocean breezes, and just the two of us. It was everything we didn't know we needed. A few weeks after we got back, we were all sitting around the living room, just another typical evening, when Lily looked at me with a strangely serious expression. "Dad," she said, "you love G like a lot, right?" "Of course," I answered, a little amused but curious where this was going. "Well," she continued, clearly building up to something, "G loves you too. Like a lot. And I was just wondering, how come you haven't adopted her yet?" I blinked, caught completely off guard. Before I could even respond, I glanced over at G. She looked nervous, eyes locked on mine, waiting. "Sweetheart," I said, my voice softer now, "there is nothing, absolutely nothing, I would want more in this world than to make you my daughter." Her eyes filled, and her whole body seemed to relax with that one sentence. What came next wasn't just a promise. It was a beginning.